first, everyone, welcome here to week 3 of the Ask Me Anything, where I'm going to, for the next hour and a half, answer questions in English first, and after we do all the English questions in Spanish. And I'm doing this to help out everyone who has questions, who wants to get me to answer it. Some of these I'll go into some instructions, into some detail. Other questions I'm going to just speculate on, right? So let's start. Question 1. I'm a foreign owner of a single member LLC. Can the LLC pay my local rent where I live and work and count that as an expense for the LLC? So you're a foreign owner. If you live outside of the US, you can use your LLC for all of your expenses. And on the annual tax filing, the form 5472, you don't have to report your income or your expenses. So the IRS doesn't care about your income or your expenses on your annual tax filing, as long as you have no US trade or business in the United States. So the answer is yes, sure. Your LLC can pay all of your expenses. And then you can report whatever you want to your local government, whether you have to or not, or whether you do or you don't. And that's completely up to you and where you live. And I know in some of my clients in Eastern Europe, those countries, if you don't bring the money back, you don't have to pay tax on it. Some countries in South America is like that as well. In Latin America, if you don't bring the money into your country and the banking system, the government don't know about it, you don't pay tax on it. Again, I'm only a US tax expert, and I'm not an expert of other countries, but generally that's how we're working here. So that's generally how it works, right? So let me go to the next question, because I think I answered that one. I'm a foreign owner of a single member LLC. If the LLC hires a US person for a consultancy, do I need to withhold taxes or ask for any form or send any form? So the short version of this question is, does a foreign-owned single member LLC have to withhold taxes or file any forms when paying US consultants? And the answer is no. There's no US taxes to withhold because you're not a US taxpayer, and you would have to report that and file that. And there's also no forms to require. Basically, it's the other way around. If there's a certain type of payment from a US person to a foreign person, that in that example, you're taking income out of the US tax bucket. So if I'm a US taxpayer and I'm paying someone outside the US, I'm basically taking tax revenues out of the United States. And only on certain types of payments from a US person to a foreign person, there is withholding required, and that's dividends, royalties, interest on private notes, it's complicated, and maybe rent, if I'm paying rent and they don't give me a W-8 ECI. That's outside the scope of this question. So the answer for you is you don't have to withhold any taxes, and you don't have to file any forms or request any forms. You can do whatever you want with your LLC. If you're a foreign-owned single member LLC owner, you don't have to report anything. It's a little different if it's a foreign-owned multi-member LLC, because if it's a multi-member LLC, you're technically a US person, and it's a little different. Most payments, the only payments that would require withholding would be payments that are effectively connected with US trade or business, and also FDAP payments. It gets a complicated answer. But the answer is, if you're a multi-member LLC and you have like US business, like rental properties, and you're making payments outside, it's a different answer, and it's a little more complicated, but it's probably still, you don't have to withhold any taxes. Do you pay taxes using Stripe Atlas? And this comes down to the second question: is it better to have an LLC or a corporation? Well, do you pay taxes using Stripe Atlas? The answer is Stripe Atlas, from my understanding, only opens US corporations. If you have a US corporation, yes, you pay taxes in the US based on your profit. You have to report all income, all expenses, the ownership, related party transactions, and there's a lot more to report with a US corporation, especially owned by a non-US resident. But in general, if Stripe Atlas only opens corporations, then yes, you have to pay taxes in the US. And this is why it might not make sense to use Stripe Atlas per se. It's cool to have the service of getting a Stripe account as well, but not everyone even qualifies. And that brings us to the second question: is it better to have an LLC or a corporation? Well, this generally depends on your business. And I have to make many assumptions to answer this question because we are talking about, I don't know the circumstances. I don't know your business. I don't know where you're from. I don't know what you're doing. I don't know your tax bracket. So I'll make up circumstances. Most of my clients and most of the people watching this video are going to be non-US residents, and they're going to be doing some kind of service or e-com or some kind of business outside of the US. Generally, if a foreign person is doing business inside the United States, if you are opening a restaurant or a grocery store or any kind of office or store that's physically in the US and doing business in the US, that's when you use a corporation to make a barrier and separate and kind of protect yourself from double taxation. If you're not doing business in the US, you don't need a corporation. The corporations are generally for when you're doing business in the US and you want to avoid double taxation, especially in your home country. So in most situations of people watching this video, an LLC is going to be a better option for you. And if you decide you want a corporation later, an LLC can elect to be taxed as a corporation, while a corporation cannot elect to be taxed as an LLC. So that's a little bit of insight on that one. You know, I think I answered that pretty well, honestly. Let's go to the next one. And then again, if you have questions, put them in the chat. After I do all these English questions and I blaze through these, I will, and these are questions that I've got emailed and I've seen on the internet posted towards me, so I'm answering them all. And then after I answer all these, I'll check out the chat again. Okay. Do I have to file Form 5472 for my LLC if I don't have a US bank account? Could I get a penalty? That's a good question. I would say that technically, I'm trying to make this a little bit bigger. Technically, if you paid to open or paid to form your LLC during the year, that is a reportable transaction that should be reported on Form 5472 and sent to the IRS. Technically, yes, you should file the Form 5472, even if you don't have a US bank account. And it's kind of silly, but it's very explicitly written in the instructions and on the form itself. And you know what? I'm going to bust this out really quick and go to hold on. How do I open this up? Let's open a Safari. Form 5472. I never use Safari. Fiverr. I've seen so many bad prepared 5472s. So on the form, and that's why I'm reviewing the actual form itself. Reportable transactions of a reporting corporation that is a foreign-owned U.S. disregarded entity, and that is a foreign-owned single-member LLC. Describe on attached sheets any other transaction as defined by these regulations, such as amounts paid or received in connection with the formation, dissolution, acquisition, and disposition of the entity, including contributions to and distributions from the entity. So it's pretty explicitly written on the form. And let me put this Safari over here so I can go back here. So you could get a penalty. Now the part two, could you get a penalty? You could. Would it be easy to abate? Probably easy to abate. You're not hiding anything you didn't know, and this is a new form, and most people aren't doing it. The thing is that the IRS isn't aggressively pursuing these so far. I have seen penalties for late filed forms or incorrectly filed forms or in certain instances. So it's always better to file. And I don't know what the IRS is going to do in the future. But if you open an LLC 3 years ago and you never filed, I wouldn't go crazy, and I probably wouldn't file late. But it depends, it's situation to situation, because if you don't file and eventually they come and say, hey, you didn't file, you're in the same situation as if you filed late. They'll still get a penalty, they'll still assess it to you, and you can't prove you knew about it. They can't prove you knew about it before and chose not to file. It's the same situation, you didn't know you had to file. So I would, if you know in time, I would probably still file. It's not that crazy of a form, and I have a nice little course. And you know, if you want, there's people on Fiverr that'll do it for you, whatever. I also do it, but if you don't even have a bank account, you know, I'd probably use my course or figure it out. But if you don't file it, it's not like the highest risk because you don't even have a bank account. If you're a foreign non-US person with no SSN and you have an LLC in Nevis, do you need a US LLC to get an EIN? And the real question is, when does a Nevis LLC need a US employer identification number, EIN number? When? Well, the answer is when it's going to have taxes withheld on a payment. So if this Nevis LLC is going to is getting paid by someone in the US and taxes are being withheld, you would need an EIN just so that you could associate those taxes being paid with your account, and so that you could request a refund if necessary. Otherwise, I don't see why you would need an EIN number. It's only in unique situations when there's tax withholding or certain payments, or it's required to do some kind of registration or some kind of transaction, but it's not a US LLC, it's a Nevis LLC. So it's a little bit different. Q6 is a good one. Why is PayPal asking for a social security number? This is a great question because it's easy to apply for a PayPal account in the US, specifically a US PayPal account. And there's a lot of reason to have a US PayPal account, because if you're selling to Americans and you're not from the US and you're using a foreign PayPal account, you're going to have to pay really bad exchange fees to get the money from US dollars to your local currency. If you have a US PayPal account, you can leave the money in dollars or transfer to a US account and not pay those exchange fees, which are much higher than bank rates. So I understand that. So if you're a foreign person, say not foreign from my perspective, non-US person, and you have a PayPal account and you're operating, you're using it, and then after you cross 20K of sales or whatever, they stop your account and they say, we need more information to continue processing transactions. And then they ask for a tax ID or a social security number. We've gotten through this with an ITIN number. This is one of the rare instances where an ITIN number is useful to have. So we've gotten through this with ITIN numbers. But generally, obviously, the PayPal wants social security numbers to show you're a US taxpayer, US resident, and to confirm that the account's owned by a resident. Because if you're not a US person, they want you to open a local account so they can charge you for the exchange fees. So the answer to why is PayPal asking for a social security number is because they want reason to close your account and force you to use a foreign account so they can charge additional fees for translating your money from US dollars to your local currency. I don't know. I wasn't told that by PayPal, pure speculation. But after explaining it all, that's why I'm arriving at that point. And I think it's a fair point. We'll see if after in the comments, someone else has something else to say about this. Should I complete Form W-8 or Form W-9? This is a great question. Let's see. No chat. Ooh. Should I complete Form W-8 or Form W-9? And that's a great question because it makes a big difference. If you're a foreign-owned single-member LLC, you're going to complete W-8 or W-8-BENE. Well, it's a W-8-BEN or BENE. And let's take a look at them. Let's put them here. So here we have Control T. We can pull it up here. Form W-9. W-9 is a simple one. Control T. Form W-8-BEN. T. Form W-8-BEN. Great. W-8-BEN-E. And I'm going to explain which form you file and when. It's pretty simple. Well, I think it's simple because I do it professionally, but I'm going to explain it to you guys so it'll be a little easier. It actually says it on the form when to file it. So that makes my job even easier here. So the Form W-9 you complete when you are a US taxpayer, request for taxpayer identification number and certification. When someone, if a company's paying me, they're going to request a W-9 so they can issue me a 1099. If I'm a US person, complete this. If I am a US individual, a C corporation, an S corporation, a partnership, or a limited liability company taxed as a C corporation, S corporation, or a partnership, I can complete this form. And for most of you watching, the most common instance of which one of my clients will file this is a limited liability company, which has a partnership tax classification, aka a multi-member limited liability company. So if there's two owners, you can give a W-9 legally, it's fine. Multi-member LLC is what we'll call it. And then you put address, Miami, and then you put your EIN number, 81123456. And then you're basically signing it, say the number is correct. I'm not subject to backup withholding. I'm a US citizen or US person defined below. And there's no FATCA reporting. You can see the instructions here. If the entity is a corporation, LLC, treated as a partnership for federal tax purposes, you put that. So this is how you complete it. It's a very simple form if you have a multi-member foreign-owned LLC, or if you have a LLC taxed as a corporation, you put a C here. Or if you have an actual corporation, you put a C there. Or if you have a C corporation with an election VSX corporation, which is uncommon for you guys, it would be here. Or if I have an LLC in my name and I'm a US person, I would check this box and not this box, and then put James Baker, and then I would put the LLC name here. That's all situations of a W-9. And then I'd put my social in that instance too. So when would you file a Form W-8 BEN? Well, I can show you here when not to file. Do not use the form if you're not an individual, if you're not a citizen, if you are not an individual. If you're a US citizen or other US person, beneficial owner connected with the US trade or business, that's a W-8 ECI, and it tells you what form you should be filing. Or a person acting as intermediary. I've never done one of these, to be honest with you. So basically, this is for a foreign person to certify he's a foreign person. If you are a foreign-owned single-member LLC, this is the form you should be providing to the people who ask for a W-9, technically speaking. If they will only accept a W-9, amend your operating agreement and make a document sharing the membership interest of your LLC to 1% of it to your CAT, and then you are a multi-member LLC. To complete this form, again, it's quite easy. My name, I'm from Argentina. So I'll say, actually, come on, guys. Mi nombre. Permanent address, US address. If you have it, it's fine. You have your mailing address is different. Foreign tax ID number, Argentina tax ID. 123186. Hey Valerie, what's up? Hey guys, appreciate you all coming here. 7 people, it's nice. So 1986 here. And then claim of treaty benefits. So this would, I'll explain when this applies, but that's basically all you need for the top part. And then you only need to complete part 2 if you're actually going to claim treaty benefits. So if you're from a tax treaty country, where here, let's do that too, Control T, US tax treaties. If a US person, if a US business or person is trying to pay you and you give them a W-8 BEN and they want to withhold taxes, we're going to come to this website and look to see if you have a tax treaty, because this tax treaty is going to probably reduce the withholding. Let's say that, I live in Argentina. There's no tax treaty. Let's pretend I live in Jamaica. Jamaica. Okay, I'm from Jamaica. Jamaica. Okay, and I'm getting paid. This is fun. Let's go to the income tax treaty. I recommend doing this yourself, especially if it's large amounts, but let's say you're getting paid royalties. Well, you can read this article about royalties. Royalties arriving in the US, which are derived and owned by a resident of the US, may be taxed in the other state. However, they must also be taxed, and the tax shall not exceed 10%. So great. So royalties. So if you're getting paid royalties, you're going to be a resident of Jamaica. Owner paragraph. This is going to be Article 12. It's fine to claim a 10% rate of withholding on royalty income. And that should be enough to get your 10% withholding. So instead of withholding 30%, they'll withhold 10%. So there's a, and then you check the box, you certify that this is you sign it, date it, and give it to, ooh, look how it went upside down. And then give it to the person who's paying you. This does not get sent to the IRS, but it gets withheld internally. Okay, and so that's when you complete a WABEN, when you are a foreign individual. And then the last form I'm going to touch on here, and I realize that I'm going a little crazy with these forms, but I get asked it a lot, to be honest with you, is form WABENE. Now, this is for a foreign corporation or entity. So do not use this if you're a US entity, a foreign individual, a foreign partnership, a foreign government, whatever. If you, this is for foreign corporations, or I guess trusts that are treated as corporations from US tax perspective. Basically, we're gonna have Jamaica Corp, Jamaica. I'm sorry, I love to say it like that. If you have a disregarded entity receiving payment, this would be my single member LLC, because this LLC is owned by the Jamaican corporation. So that's a disregarded entity receiving the payment. Chapter 3 status is almost always corporation. Not going to be all these other crazy stuff. And if it is, you should call me. And sorry, admit this new person. And for chapter 4 status, it's almost always going to be an active non-foreign financial entity. I went over this a number of times. It's all this other stuff is for banks. None of the other stuff really applies. Maybe it's a passive non-foreign, non-financial foreign entity. So if you, it's an active or passive business, you know, whatever. It doesn't really matter. It's then because it's part 25 or 26, and we'll look at both of those parts. Then you're going to put your Kingston, whatever, Kingston, Jamaica, mailing address if different, whatever. Identification of the beneficial owner. Here you're going to put the tax ID of the owner, the beneficial owner, which would generally they want to know who is. I think this is of the corporation. I'm not going to go into crazy. And then after that, we're talking about the disregarded entity or branch payments. So that doesn't matter. No one fills that out. And then here's the, if the treaty benefits apply, you're going to go into the claim of treaty benefits. Hey, Margie. You got to do the treaty benefits. And then basically to finish up the form, you go to part 26 or 27. You just check the box and certify your passive or certify your active and sign it. You know, I don't want to go, I know I'm killing this point here, but good, nothing in the chat. Okay, I know I'm beating this down, but that's, you know, when you do a W9, when you do a W8 BEN, or when you do a W8 BENE. This guy's coming in and out. I have an LLC. What tax forms do I need to complete to keep compliant? This is not, if you have an LLC and you're the only owner, oh, there's many scenarios. If a US person has an LLC, they include the results on their personal tax return. The LLC is disregarded for tax purposes. So that's what you have to complete. If you're a foreign person, you have an LLC and you have like a rental property, you actually have to file a US tax return personally and pay taxes personally. The form 5472 that we never stop talking about is an informational form, and that doesn't really that doesn't calculate a tax. That's just sharing information, and it's required. But if there's actual tax because there's US business, US trade or business, then you have to file a tax return based on the type of entity that owns the LLC to keep compliant. If the LLC makes an election to be taxed as a C corporation or as an S corporation, then you have to file those forms. Or if there's more than one member, you have to file 1065, a partnership form. So there's many different options and ways that you file returns for a US LLC. It really depends on who the owner is and what you're doing. Oh, this is a good one. Another open-ended question. I owe taxes to the IRS. What are my options? Pay or don't pay? Next, I'm just kidding. So obviously, if you want to pay, you can do an installment agreement, you can do a full pay agreement, you can, if you're completely broke and you owe money, there you can do an offer and compromise and actually not pay them back if you have no assets and you're broke. And this is again for my US residents and generally individuals. For businesses, it's a little trickier because you can kind of abandon the business and the IRS can come after you, and it's just a slow process. So if you want to pay the IRS, if you owe taxes, you can either pay right away. That's an obvious answer. You can do installment agreements. You apply for it depending on the amount of taxes you owe. You can do an offer and compromise and get the taxes wiped out. You could get into currently not collectible status, which is a status where they basically don't chase you for the money because they know you're broke, but you still owe the money, but they kind of just let it sit. And after 10 years, that's the collection statute. If you owe taxes to the IRS for 10 years, after 10 years, it falls off. You don't have to pay them back. It won't stick with you forever. It's a 10-year statute. There's different ways to reset the statute or pause the statute. The CSED, it's called CSED. I don't even remember what the acronym stands for, but the collection statute elimination date or something. I don't remember, but you can also just wait it out. Again, generally, these are going to be people who are paying taxes in the US or have a US business. I guess the other option is do nothing and eventually have your bank accounts levied by the IRS. You know, there's a lot of options. I would recommend addressing it with the IRS and moving forward. If you have questions, though, you can start listing them in the chat if I haven't answered them yet, because I'm almost at the end, I think. What's the difference between an LLC and a corporation? Well, they're both completely different types of legal entities to start. An LLC doesn't have shares. A corporation has shares. The ownership's different. They're registered different with the state. They have different legal attributes. And from a tax perspective, a corporation in the US always pays taxes in the US, and an LLC pays taxes based on the owner's situation. And that's how we have all of you folks in here who live outside the US and have LLCs and pay no US taxes, because it's a disregarded entity. So when I have an LLC, I still have to file a personal tax return and put whatever happens with my LLC on my personal taxes. And for you guys outside the country, you don't really have to pay taxes in the US if you're not doing anything here, which is what I'm constantly talking about. So the main difference is, there's a lot of legal differences. There's a lot of state differences. There's a lot of, operational differences. There's a lot more you need to do with a corporation to keep it in legal status. And if you don't do all of the things, I'm not an attorney, but if you don't do all of the things like corporate minutes, issue shares, and all of that, then it's harder. You have less legal protection. Since there's less to do with an LLC, it's safer. And I was working with an asset protection attorney, and actually LLCs, he told me that LLCs provide more asset protection than corporations do. It's not my ballpark. That's why I work with really smart guys. And I'm actually going to have Yoni on, I'm going to do a Q&A with him. I'm still ironing out this process, but I'm going to do an interview about trust and asset protection in a future video, maybe next week, the week after, because I'm just getting the hang of these weekly calls. I'm really having fun with it. I love just talking. This is a question that people get to ask all the time. What is a DBA and why you don't need it? Well, that's what I'm going to say. You don't need it. A DBA is doing business as, and the only benefit I can see from having a DBA is that you can receive, I actually have one client who uses this effectively, but you can receive wires to your bank account in the name of your DBA company. So if my company is named James Baker LLC, I can still have a website that says Best Toys in America, like Best Toys in America, like that can be the name of my store, and I can sell toys, and they just pay James Baker LLC. It doesn't matter. You don't really need a DBA, but if you want someone to send you a wire to your bank account in the name of Best Toys in America, then you can you register the DBA with the state, register it with the bank, and then you can receive a wire in the name of that company. That's when you need to get a DBA, so you can receive wires in the name of something to banks. And you have to register with the state and with the bank. Otherwise, you don't need it to operate under a different brand. I have, I have James Baker and Associates. I do professional services, whatever. People can pay me. I have like 7 LLCs that I just play around with them, open them, try them out, see what I can apply for. You can pay me to any of my LLCs. It doesn't matter. I'm still going to pay tax on it in the US. It's going to make my accounting annoying, but it doesn't matter that the names aren't the same. So you don't need an LLC. I mean, you don't need a DBA unless you need to receive wires in the name of a company that's not your LLC registered name. That's the only reason you do need an a DBA. And it's the second Q12. What is foreign tax credit explained? This is great. I'm going to give you a really simple explanation of how the foreign tax credits work. And this is not a US concept. This is a global concept. Let's use my Jamaica example. If I am doing business in the US, but if I'm doing business in the US and in Jamaica, and I'm being taxed from both places, per the treaty, I should only pay tax on where whatever the treaty says. I'm not going to reference the treaty again, but let's say that I earn 80% of my income in the US, and that's a bad example. I'm not going to use this example. Let's use an example where I'll use a personal example. Let's say that I am living and working in Switzerland and I'm paying local taxes in Switzerland. I'm a US citizen. Since I'm paying taxes in Switzerland and I'm working in Switzerland, I can claim a foreign tax credit against my US taxes, because I have to file a US tax return anyway because I'm a US citizen. This is the most common example that I see of foreign tax credits. The only other examples are with multinational corporations, because most businesses only operate in one jurisdiction. Foreign tax credits are only used when you're operating and paying taxes in multiple jurisdictions. And the idea is most simply explained in my situation. If I'm paying taxes on income earned in Switzerland, Switzerland has the right to tax me first. So on my US tax return, I calculate my taxes, and let's say I make $100,000, my tax is $15,000. I already paid 25, or I already paid 30,000 in Switzerland. So I can get a credit for that difference in the US. And basically, I can carry over the rest. So I can get a credit. I won't pay any US taxes. And then I also have the extra $15,000 to carry forward to the next year. Here's the question. I'm going to read the question to you. I work in China, and I just opened an LLC. What should I do with the money? How do I get the money back home? Should we keep the money on the owner's personal account? Should we send it back to the China company? How much profit should we keep? It's all up to you, to be honest with you. I would probably say keep it in the US LLC. You don't have to pay taxes on it, and you'll have US dollars, and you'll be a little diversified. If you need money in China, send it back to China. I know the ways to getting money in and out of China, you have to have official invoices. It's a little more complicated, but you need to follow your rules in China as well, in terms of reporting and bringing the money back. So you can do whatever you want. I would probably recommend diversifying the accounts. If you have $1 million in one account, I'd probably say open 3 or 4 accounts and put $300,000 in each one. If you have FDIC insured accounts, that's federal deposit. I don't even know what it stands for, but it's the government's insuring banks accounts up to $250,000 per account. If you have FDIC insurance, it only covers up to $250,000. So open multiple accounts and only put $250 in an account. I know that's a big like amount, but you can also use brokerage accounts. You can invest the money, and all of that's tax free. So I would probably leave it in the US or and invest it unless you need it in China, just because it's so much easier to control it and move it around in the US based on my understanding. I've never had an account in China. So you can do whatever you want. That's my answer. You can keep all the profits in the US, or you can send it to China, whatever serves you best. But there's no problem keeping the profits in the US, and there's no problem opening brokerage accounts, investing, diversifying. If you buy real estate, then you should probably use different entities. But you can move the money all between your own holdings. It's your money. You have the freedom to send it wherever you want. And the banks are pretty easy about that. So thanks for asking the question, buddy. My man Robert says, what if we do want to do business in the US with US clients? That's a great question. If you do want, and that's doing business in the US and having US clients are different things. So you can have a foreign-owned single-member LLC. You can be Juan in Argentina and have an LLC and have only U.S. clients and still not pay U.S. taxes. It's only when Juan flies to the U.S., meets his clients, signs contracts in person, or has a store in the US or does stuff physically in the US that you'd be having tax issues in the US. And if you're doing all of that stuff, that's when you want to consider a corporation. I say consider, I'm not saying decide that right away, but that's when you have some things to consider because you would be subject to US taxation. The banks and the government don't really work together. The government doesn't know when you're getting paid. The banks don't automatically tell them. It's very different from Latin America. But if you do want to do business in the US and you are already living in, especially in a high tax jurisdiction, that's when it might warrant using a corporation. So, but having US clients does not mean you have to pay taxes in the US. No problem with that. And then drop shippers are another good example of that. If you want to elaborate more on that, Robert, go ahead. Can you explain in brief the annual report? Okay. What is an annual report and why do you have to do it is the question, right? When you register an LLC in a state like Wyoming or Delaware or Arizona or California, I can sing the song. I know all the states. Sing the song or don't sing the song. Okay, I'll sing it later. You have to, most states require you to file an annual report to keep the company open. That's it. It's their way of updating their records, confirming addresses, and collecting fees for having companies open. The annual report for Wyoming is not very expensive, but it's basically a report you have to file wherever you have your LLC registered to maintain the databases and the records and pay a small fee to just keep it there. Some states like New Mexico don't require an annual report, but I find that these states have poor services in terms of making amendments to the forms, getting things changed and dealing with stuff because I mean, I guess they make less revenue, so they have less staff. I don't know, but I've had issues with that in the past. But I think that answers the question, Eric. I mean, I don't even have anything else to say about that. Valerie's got a question here. Question for a non-US citizen, LLC starting Amazon stuff for US, anything to watch out for? So Eric, good question. You have to disclose the amounts you have in the bank, for instance, on this form. The annual report, you don't have to disclose anything. They do ask about, in Wyoming, I think they ask about your assets, but they're referring to your assets in Wyoming. So they want to know if you have a big house in Wyoming or a property in Wyoming or a business in Wyoming, which almost no one does. It's the least populated state in the United States, I believe, or maybe Alaska. But I think Wyoming is less. I was in Alaska 2 years ago and I was looking into it because I couldn't find anyone there, but Alaska's huge. Wyoming's a beautiful state, but on that disclosure, you only have to disclose your assets in Wyoming, which is almost always going to be 0. Okay, so, and again, more about the annual report. Thanks, Ariel. The annual report is submitted annually. So if Florida, Delaware, and most states require it to be done on a date. So if you open a Delaware LLC in December, you have to pay that $300 to renew it by May 1st the next year. Wyoming's beautiful, and that's why another reason I like Wyoming, because they're all the same thing. I'm not gonna lie to you. Wyoming, Delaware, the same thing. Wyoming is annually. So if you open the LLC in December 1st, you pay that much smaller annual fee the next year on December 1st. That's a good question. Yeah, basically just leave it all blank, Eric. I honestly, I don't even do it myself. I usually let my registered agents do it and I think they put 0 for everything. You know, let's play with this for a second. You can look up Wyoming LLCs. I have a Wyoming LLC. Control T, let's give me here. So the Wyoming LLCs are private. Get out of here, hide meeting controls. So let's do Wyoming LLC search. We're gonna go to the Wyoming website. Let's see if Tesla has a company registered in Wyoming and see who the owner is or how they registered it, because I'm sure they have some kind of registration in Wyoming. I tried to do this in the past to get all of Tesla's registrations and put it all together in one document, make an NFT out of it and sell it for $50 million. But then I gave up because gave up, but it's a cool idea, right? Because you can look up these in many states. Tesla Motors. Maybe they don't. Come on. Well, to answer your question, yeah, you can put no on everything. It should be fine to just put no. Trying to get this open, but it's not going to be there. Okay, so I don't know why it must be really slow. Whatever. We'll go back later. I need to get to. You should check out Spoke. It's so cool. Okay, so let's go back to my chat here because you guys are giving me some good questions. The registered agent sent me the form to fill in. I'm just a bit unsure to do with it. Name is no longer Tesla Motors. Well, Robert, it's not the search isn't filling up anyways. We just kicking the can here. Where the money in the bank is then no, the money doesn't matter. I really think it's physical assets on the form. Yeah, but I don't know the answer. I'll ask my attorney after the call. Why? Let's look it up right now on the actually annual report online filing. Let's move this over here. Current financial to compute the license tax. So let's see this license tax. Wyoming license tax. Name of form, appendix 1, worksheet, annual report, not a public record, only assets located and employed in Wyoming. Yeah, Eric, answer your own question, my man. Thank you. I don't know all these rules. Yes, 60 or 0.2 million of the dollar, which is greater based on the company's assets located and employed in the state of Wyoming. So you have no one has assets in the state of Wyoming unless you do, and then this is like you have more complicated stuff going on because Wyoming's very particular. It's a beautiful state. Again, top 5 most beautiful states of the US. I love it. Okay, so cash lines and exactly, but the cash isn't located in Wyoming. The cash is located in the internet online. It's on the bank unless you have a suitcase of cash in Wyoming. I'm putting that at 0, and so is everyone else. Okay, so Valerie wants to ask another person asking about setting up an Amazon store as a non-resident. The things to watch out for is just following the rules so you don't get your store shut down, and then doing what you have to do to get your store set up correctly. There's a lot of different ways to run Amazon. And I didn't answer your question, Margie. If you have I didn't answer it already. If you put it on here, I'll just answer it now. We can skip it later because I don't want you to wait. I want to answer your questions. But yeah, Valerie, it depends on the method of which you're doing Amazon. If you have your own product, just advertise it well. I'm not an Amazon expert, but they won't be withholding taxes. And if you can do Amazon fulfillment, that's better. And faster delivery is always going to win. Try and get ranked, do good SEO. I don't know. I got to do more on Amazon stores. I put something in I think someone asked me, I went into a lot of detail and a lot of opinions about Amazon 2 videos ago. So I hope that helps a little bit, Valerie, but it's really all about just having good products at a good price and getting it to people quickly, and you'll be fine. This is Margie still here. Yes. Can an LLC work for a non-US citizen who is a trader? From the point of view of the tax asset protection, would this mean the LLC would need to register the account holder as the account holder at exchanges? Great question. So I'm going to go back to this and I'm going to pull up I want this to be the background. There you go, chat. There you go. Great question, Margie. What do I have to look out for if I want to do investments and trading as a foreign person with a US LLC? That's the question. And there's a number of things to look out for. And this is a good question for everyone because If you're here, you're probably foreign, you probably have an LLC, and hopefully you're very successful and you make a lot of money and you want to invest it. So the issue, traditional stock, is that if you have it in your own name and you die, your family has to file estate tax forms and pay taxes on the value of your shares, US stock, over $60,000 in the account, and the brokerage won't release those funds until you show that you pay the taxes. And I'm in the middle of this for like 10 different clients who didn't know me until they couldn't get the money out of their parents' brokerage accounts and realized they had to file this form and Googled it and found me. So I'm telling you now that this is an estate tax issue primarily because as a foreign person, you don't have to pay taxes on crypto or on this capital gains of shares. The brokerage will withhold taxes on dividends from US companies. They will withhold, based on your treaty rate, because you could have a treaty rate, but that's, it's that it is what it is. That's, no avoiding that. So an LLC will work. And the thing is that if you're going to be investing heavily in these things, the best way to do it is with a foreign corporation or an offshore corporation. I'm doing a structure for a gentleman in Costa Rica right now, and it's a little slower, it's a little more tedious, but it's fireproof. The idea is that we have a foreign offshore corporation that owns an LLC, and that LLC is investing. The idea is the foreign corporation is just like you, it's a non-US person, but unlike you, a foreign corporation can never die because it's not a person, it's a piece of paper. So that's the most secure way to do it. But from a tax standpoint, a tax minimization standpoint, and asset protection standpoint, the LLC works. But if you have another entity on top of that owns the LLC, it's harder to open stuff. It's just like a little more tedious, but it does give you better asset protection. It's one step further from you. And it's one step, it's going to take the courts to another offshore jurisdiction. I'm going to have, I'm going to answer that next. And I'm going to have an asset protection guy on, especially if like Margie's a client, for the client specifically. I'll see how we do that. And we can talk in this more detail, but you have no tax on crypto gains in the LLC. There's no tax on crypto gains. There's no tax on stock gains, which are way more easy to track. And yeah, there's no tax on any of these. So I would register an institutional account with FTX or with Binance, which I've done multiple times. FTX is one of the best. It's really easy to register an institutional account in the name of your company and trade with that. Especially if you're trading with crypto, there's no US tax. And not only is there no US tax, the government wouldn't know about it anyway. So you don't even have to explain yourself. You still have the same reportable transaction stuff, but there's no US tax. The reason you may want a different LLC is if you have any exposure with your regular business activities. Again, lawsuits are pretty rare, especially for like your types of businesses, like professional services. No one wants lawsuits. The big difference here and a big point is that you don't want to invest. If you're a foreign person, you don't want to invest in stocks, in crypto, using your LLC if your LLC has a US trade or business or owns US real estate, because then you're really bringing your gains into the US tax mess because you have stuff in the US. But for people that don't have any US businesses or anything, you don't have to pay taxes on this stuff. And it's pretty clear. And I would recommend, yes, institutional accounts for trading over personal accounts, but it doesn't really matter. What are the reporting requirements within LLC for foreigners? More details, Robert. Let me go to, if you go to on here, you go to ftx.us, and I like FTX. It's a Miami thing. It's this guy who runs FTX seems to be buying up everything. I wouldn't keep a ton of money on here all the time or on any exchange, but if you're trading, you're trading. You create an account, and when you have to create an account on the first page, and then after you create an account, it asks there's a little line, they'll say, do you want an institutional account? You click that yes, and you basically say you put your documents, your LLC docs, your EIN letter, an operating agreement, a passport, and explain whose money you're using. You say, I'm trading with my own money, maybe a picture of your bank account. and then they'll approve it in a couple of days, and then you're trading. It's very simple. I would definitely recommend FTX. Binance has been taking forever. Kraken's confusing. It's an application process now. Believe me, I'm all over this stuff. So then you can cash out crypto into your bank that's in the name of your LLC. Yes, it does need to be the bank and the crypto account and the bank account need to have the same name for FTX to accept the funds. I literally just sent funds to an institutional account yesterday. If you use Mercury, you have to send them a picture of the transaction to verify the wire. Okay, so let me finish up this point with Margie. Yeah, so that's it. So apply for FTX. You have a Mercury account. When you send money to FTX account, start with a small transaction. They're going to send you a message 2 days later saying, please send proof you sent the money. You send them the proof, and then a day later they process it and it's in your account. Then you have to set up 2-factor authentication to be able to convert it and buy it and spend it. And there's still no CRS on U.S. bank accounts for foreigners. The United States doesn't comply with CRS, only with VATCA. I mean, I'm not an expert in that. Does USA comply with CRS? I'm pretty sure no. There's no reason to expect the U.S. citizens to be subject to CRS reporting. If the United States adopts it, U.S. citizens will be reported if they are considered U.S. tax residents for U.S. CRS. Should the United States adopt CRS? Is U.S. part of CRS? Yeah. So a non-participating jurisdiction under CRS regulations. And that's from foodmanpa.com. So you got to trust that. Ariel says, can an institutional account of foreign-owned LLC be opened under something like Vanguard or Robinhood? It's much more complicated. Robinhood, no. Vanguard, yes. But many of the larger brokerages like Chase, whatever, Credit Suisse, all of these, like more Wells Fargo, the big banks, the big brokerages for foreign people and for foreign corporations to open brokerage accounts, the minimum investments are $100,000 plus. For Wells Fargo, it's like $2 million. And when Peru had those elections a couple of years ago, they were opening accounts every day, bringing in a ton of money. Great question, Eric. I'm going to skip you, Robert. I'll go back. Are there any updates on the FinCEN filing for foreign-owned single-member LLCs? No, I haven't heard any update about the FinCEN filing. And in case I missed it, let's Corporate Transparency Act effective date. So the thing is, I'll know because when this goes into effect, yeah, the US is coming. This is good. It's from JD Super. It's from a law firm. The US Beneficial Ownership Data, the US National Beneficial Ownership Database. As soon as 2022 or 2023, a new U.S. regulatory requirement come into effect will affect over 25 million existing business entities and another 3-4 million new entities each year. So when the states, I don't know how it's going to be done or how they're going to implement it, but when entities are opened, it will be required to be reported as well. So that's how I know they haven't put it into effect yet. So that's a great question, Eric. Let me go back up to Robert. Good question. What are the reporting requirements? Okay, like, do we need to keep any records, like a CPA? Do we need to submit yearly? So if a foreign-owned LLC needs to do, it technically needs to keep accounting records. If the IRS asks, generally you'll have a month to reply, and you can request another month. So you can have 2 months to do all your accounting, anyways, depending on how complicated your business is. Most of my clients, in general, this type of entity isn't prone to overcomplicated accounting in multiple accounts. So you can keep your accounting and you have to file your form 5472. And then this Corporate Transparency Act thing is coming soon too. And then as long as you have no US traded business, that's it. So it can be quite easy, especially if you're tuning into my calls every week. Okay, guys. Oh my goodness. I'm really rattling this off. They're gonna have to record this on half speed. I love the questions, so thanks for participating. I'm going to jump back into these and blaze through these. What are the steps of becoming a U.S. expat? You leave the U.S. and you live outside of the United States as a U.S. person, and you become a U.S. expatriate. If you want to claim the foreign earned income exclusion, you need to satisfy the physical presence test or the bona fide residence test. And then you can exclude up to the first 120,000 or so of income earned outside of the U.S. So you can avoid, if you can't use the foreign tax credit, at least you can use the foreign earned income exclusion and avoid double taxation. So for most people, they're not paying double taxes living outside the U.S., even though the U.S. does impose worldwide global taxation. Is there a way to use my foreign-owned single-member LLC profit to purchase items and avoiding your personal bank account? Because then taxes apply. You mean local taxes in your home country? Yes. That's what everyone does, Eric. That's the answer. The answer is that if you have an LLC and you're paying taxes in your home country, when you wire yourself money, just spend make all your personal expenses with the LLC debit card so that you don't have to bring the money back. And when we do the accounting at the end of the year, we'll consider all these personal expenses as distributions. Easy. But then the distributions are the amount to be taxed. Well, Eric, you can call it whatever you can call it whatever you want, your home country. In the US, you don't have to disclose what it is or what it isn't, unless it's a payment to you, which we would call it distributions, or we would call it a payments to you, or we could call it business expenses and have it be incorrect, but it's not really going to be audited because it's not even a form that you pay tax on. So you can keep the distributions lower. And also the form 5472 aren't like shared automatically with other governments. So it's not something that anyone will see anyways. Not quite sure how it looks in practice. Cool, Eric. Form 5472, your business sold $1 million of widgets. You bought 2 Ferraris. And you spent let's say someone paid you $1 million for services and you bought 2 Ferraris for 600,000 total. Good for you. You can call that whatever you want. For me, we could call it consideration paid, and you can say I received $600,000 of consideration in the form of Ferraris, or you can call it make a separate sheet and put amounts paid in these are distributions from the entity, or we can file this with less numbers and you can say the Ferraris were a business expense and not report them. It's up to you. It's not a it's up to you. You know, the IRS is not going to audit these forms in terms of like the form or the substance unless there's some kind of issue. In this situation, it's really up to you. And the IRS, you're not paying taxes. The IRS doesn't care if it's a business expense or not, practically speaking, right? Yeah, exactly. You buy an iPhone, then why then owns these Ferraris? Because you want Ferraris, man. Who owns the Ferraris? You can put them in your own name. It's fine. The iPhone's in your own name as well. Maybe this is a bad example. But yeah, you buy it, you put it in your own name and call it a business expense. I would still file the 5472 just to have it on file, but we wouldn't call it a distribution or a payment if you don't want to. I generally explain this to the clients and let them tell me how they see this being shown, like how this, like you'll see the forms and you'll sign it before we file it. So if you are really concerned about your home country taxing you on what you were paid, and you want to call everything a business expense and it's things bought for you, then that's fine. If you actually did wire money to yourself, then yeah, it's a pretty obvious thing here. But from the US side, if it's just an expense, it's an expense. So what I recommend people do, sure, if you have a Mercury account, create one account for the business operations and create a separate account for you to use. and just pay yourself into the separate business account and use that one so you can internally budget. That's the easiest way to do it. Like use a savings account or a separate card and or a separate account, because in Mercury you can create multiple accounts, and Relay you can as well. So that's what I would recommend. So you guys can go if you don't want to listen to me talk in Spanish. If you like Spanish, I'm switching. Estoy cambiando. I appreciate you all being here. This is a lot of fun for me. I'm going to keep adding more. This is just testing trials, and I'm going to start doing interviews and adding more value. I'm just trying to get the hang of this stuff. Entonces, preguntas en español. Gracias por estar aquí de nuevo para mi parte en español. Yo quiero revisar las preguntas más comunes para que ustedes puedan tener las respuestas. Y bueno. Soy propietario extranjero de una LLC de solo un miembro. ¿Puede la LLC pagar y alquilar de mi local y contarlo como un gasto para la LLC? Eso es algo que estamos revisando hace 5 minutos en inglés. Pero cuando usted es un extranjero y tiene un LLC, foreign owned, single member, solo un miembro LLC, solo tiene que reportar las transacciones entre su LLC y su compañía, y nunca paga impuestos si no tiene ningún negocio en Estados Unidos. Entonces, puede considerar todos sus gastos, como todo el dinero que gasta, como un gasto para su LLC. No sé el propósito, eso puede ser para su país local o puede ser por su estado financieros, pero eso es una decisión suya, pero puede hacer los dos y no va a pagar impuestos a Estados Unidos. Creo que para considerarlo como un gasto es mejor, porque en su país donde vives, eso va a aparecer como un gasto y no va a pagar impuestos en su país tampoco. Bueno, puede así. Entonces, sí, puede usar su LLC para pagar todos sus gastos y para manejar su vida. Yo recomiendo que use 2 cuentas en su LLC solo para manejar su presupuesto y manejar sus cuentas y ser más organizado. Eso es solo una recomendación de un contador. Bueno, soy propietario extranjero de una LLC de solo un miembro. Si mi LLC contrata a una persona en Estados Unidos para una consultoría, ¿debo retener impuestos? Preguntar por algún formulario, enviar algún formulario. Eso es una buena pregunta porque eso pasa mucho. Yo voy a contarlo. La pregunta en resumen es así, eso para Dani también. Si estoy pagando a alguien de Estados Unidos, tengo que retener impuestos. Y la respuesta es no, nunca. Si usted es un extranjero con un LLC y no tiene negocio en Estados Unidos, nunca tiene que retener impuestos en Estados Unidos, porque sus dineros no está sujeto a impuestos en Estados Unidos. El concepto es sencillo. Solo una compañía que está pagando impuestos en Estados Unidos tiene que retener cuando está sacando dinero afuera del sistema de Estados Unidos. Es decir, si yo soy un americano y yo estoy pagando impuestos y yo pago a un extranjero de un tipo de pago que está considerado conectado con un negocio, como dividendos o intereses o royalties, en ese ejemplo yo tengo que retener, pero al revés nunca tiene que retener porque su dinero está sujeto a impuesto a otro país. Entonces, así no tiene que pedir ningún formulario tampoco. Solo cuando usted, como un extranjero con un LLC, está recibiendo un pago, ellos van a pedir formularios, ellos van a considerar hacer retenciones, pero usted no tiene que hacer nada. Mejor. ¿Pagas impuestos usando Stripe Atlas? Buena pregunta. Si abres una corporación C con Stripe Atlas, sí, eso es una compañía que se paga impuestos en Estados Unidos. Ese tipo de compañía, una corporación, paga impuestos a nivel federal y a nivel estatal. Es 21% a nivel federal y hay mucho más cosas que tiene que reportar. Es recomendado si no tiene un negocio en Estados Unidos usar una LLC, pero una corporación sirve, es una buena idea para diferente gente dependiendo de sus circunstancias. Y así es la segunda parte, y eso puede ser así juntos, ¿no? ¿Es mejor tener una LLC o una corporación? Y la respuesta es relacionada a la pregunta de arriba. Eso depende de dónde estás, de dónde vienes y el negocio que estás haciendo. El ejemplo más sencillo es si usted está entregando servicios, haciendo un trabajo desde su sillón en su país, afuera de Estados Unidos, y no tiene ningún negocio en Estados Unidos, ninguna oficina ni nada, una LLC probablemente es mejor porque no va a tener que pagar impuestos en Estados Unidos. Pero si usted tiene una tienda y si viene a Estados Unidos para servir a sus clientes presencialmente, y si hace masaje o algo así, una corporación puede servir porque eso le ayuda a la compañía grande para evitar doble impuestos. Y no queremos pagar doble impuestos. Oh, Robert habla español también. Ok, Robert, dame un segundo. Entonces, eso depende lo que está haciendo y dónde viene, si quiere usar una LLC o una corporación. Si tienes una corporación, puede usar los tax treaties, pero una LLC no se puede usar porque no está pagando impuestos en Estados Unidos. Entonces, para la mayoría de mis clientes y gente viendo ese video, una LLC sirve porque si decide que necesita una corporación para propósito de impuestos, puede hacer una elección con una LLC para que se paguen impuestos como una corporación. Y eso le ofrece la flexibilidad. Otras diferencias son sobre cosas legales. Yo no soy abogado en Estados Unidos, yo soy contador público. Eso dedicamos más en impuestos y es esa cosa porque hay muchos problemas legales en Estados Unidos. Los abogados están enfocados en eso. Pero hay diferentes razones así. Mi diferente abogado me ha dicho que una LLC tiene mejor protección legal que una corporación. Y yo estoy en acuerdo porque una corporación es más difícil manejar y mantener estatus legal de esa compañía. Tengo una pregunta de Robert. ¿Está bien, Robert? No, está perfecto. Así que puedo tener un negocio basado en servicios, marketing, desarrollo con clientes de los Estados Unidos, pero si no estoy o no tengo oficina, entonces no pagan impuestos estadounidenses, sí. Y para evitar pagar impuestos sobre mi nómina en el país que soy residente fiscal, hago todos mis gastos de mi cuenta de LLC y etiqueto como distribuciones que nunca pasa por mi cuenta personal. Sí, yo no voy a avisarle, pero la pregunta es, ¿cómo usar una LLC y no pagar impuestos en mi país? Uh, y eso depende mucho de dónde viene, si su país y toda esa cosa, pero ya hemos establecido que Estados Unidos no comparte información con nadie. Hay diferentes acuerdos y si un país pide información de usted, creo que sí, lo va a compartir. Pero sobre impuestos, eso no es algo que estamos compartiendo. No hay un FATCA que ustedes pone a Estados Unidos. Entonces, si quiere hacer eso, abre un LLC, hace su negocio de afuera, de todo digital, de todo remote, sus servicios, su vaina, vendiendo cosas, eso no importa lo que está haciendo. Puede vender cursos, puede vender radios, puede vender servicios, no importa, si no hace nada en Estados Unidos y no pagan impuestos a Estados Unidos, puede tener también clientes de Estados Unidos, eso no importa. De ese dinero que entra a su cuenta de Estados Unidos, tiene la opción de no reportar nada en su país, dependiendo de las leyes de su país. También tiene la opción de considerar todos sus pagos, todos sus gastos personales como gastos de la compañía cuando hacen sus estados financieros. Tiene muchas opciones, pero todo depende de su país. Mucha gente van a considerar abrir una offshore, un bloqueador cooperativo. Eso puede ser una compañía que Isla Cayman. Hay bastante. Pero si tiene eso, la idea es que la resulta de sí se para con esa compañía en Isla Cayman y esa compañía sí, esa compañía paga impuestos, pero la tasa de impuesto para ganancia fuera de su país es cero. Entonces, está sujeto a impuesto, pero de un tasa de cero. Entonces, pues, quizás eso sirve para su país. Yo no sé, eso es diferente cosa que la gente se hace. Yo no puedo decir que es mejor para usted, pero eso es como usa una LLC no pagar impuestos en su país, ¿no? Oh, mira, puedo, siguiente pregunta. Yo puedo abrir una LLC debajo de una sociedad de Canadá o tiene que ser a mi nombre. Um, ¿Tendrás de problemas para obtener business credit por ser extranjero o tener LLP de Ontario como empresa madre? Ya estamos hablando de diferentes circunstancias. Ya un LLC puede ser debajo de cualquier compañía. No, la pregunta es, ¿qué tipo de compañía puede tener una LLC? Y la respuesta es cualquier persona o compañía o fideicomiso puede tener un LLC debajo de eso, pero no puede abrir ninguna cuenta bancaria, ningún brokerage account, ninguna cosa, proceder de pago sin decir quién es el dueño de la compañía. Por razones de KYC, siempre las instituciones tienen que saber quién es el dueño o quién es la persona responsable para todo eso. Entonces, por eso, eso es más para protecciones legales, para planificación estatal de evitar impuestos, excepciones y todo eso. Muchos mexicanos se está usando una LLC con sociedades en Canadá, con fideicomisos, con operaciones, y eso es para sus reglas en sus países. Entonces, hay, eso es la respuesta. Cualquier entidad puede tener una LLC. Tengo que presentar formulario 5472 si no tenía una cuenta bancaria en Estados Unidos. La respuesta es oficialmente que sí. Si pagaste para abrir la compañía y todos los estados requieren un pago, tiene que reportar ese pago que hiciste para la formación de la compañía. Si no hiciste, puedes recibir una sanción, pero eso no es probable. Eso no es probable y mientras yo voy a recomendar que lo hace ese reporte, si no lo hace porque aparece que no sabía de eso, o no tenía dinero o nada, el riesgo es muy bajo si no reportes, pero yo voy a avanzar, yo no avanzo, yo voy a decir yo recomiendo que inicie reportando eso en el futuro para evitar problemas en el futuro, porque el IRS se puede cambiar como ellos están manejando ese sistema y puede iniciar cobrando impuestos mañana si quiere, o cobrando sanciones, ¿no? Entonces, sí, recomiendo que lo hace y sí, puede recibir una sanción, pero no es muy probable. Y para revisar también, si pagaste para abrir su LLC, tiene que reportar eso. Tengo otra pregunta de nuestro estimado Robert. ¿Hay manera de obtener un personal credit score en Estados Unidos sin vivir en Estados Unidos? Sí hay, pero es un poco más complicado. Yo no soy experto en eso, pero hay una compañía que mis clientes han usado. Yo voy a investigar más con ellos, pero se llama creditsuite.com y ellos se ayudan a gente a establecer business credit. Y ese business credit es crédito de su negocio. Eso no es, pero para ir una tarjeta de crédito es un poco más complicado. Business credit se usa más para préstamos, para operaciones, para diferentes cosas así. We help businesses get capital. Find business credit, get loans and credit lines. Here's your credit building guide. Chequea en ese sitio web porque ellos tienen mucha información y yo me gusta la información y yo tengo clientes que han usado eso. Bueno, y así, déjame ver si me gusta. No, ah, ¿Por qué PayPal solicita un número de seguro social? Y yo estaba contestando eso en inglés y me realicé por qué. Y ya, yo entiendo, yo tengo una idea de por qué. Y yo voy a explicar cómo sirve y vamos a llegar en el por qué. Si usted no es de Estados Unidos, PayPal quiere que se abra un PayPal de su país. Ah, mucha gente que tiene LLC o compañía de Estados Unidos quiere usar un PayPal de Estados Unidos porque tiene clientes en Estados Unidos. Yo soy un gringo, somos los mejores compradores en el mundo, compramos de todo. Y si está vendiendo algo, debe vender a los gringos porque vamos a comprar. Y yo uso PayPal, yo pago por PayPal mucho, de verdad. Y si yo puedo pagar por PayPal, yo cojo a veces. Entonces es importante tenerlo para su empresa, su compañía de Estados Unidos, pero a veces lo que pasa, tiene su PayPal, está facturando, está vendiendo, después que vende, como decimos, $20,000 de servicio o productos, PayPal va a pedir, va a hacer una alerta que dice, necesitamos más información de su cuenta, y ellos va a decir su Social Security Number o su ITIN, un Tax Identification Number, para confirmar que usted es de Estados Unidos. Y yo creo que ellos hacen eso porque si ellos cierran esa cuenta, tiene que operar con su cuenta local en su país. Y lo que pasa es que va a cobrar en dólares y PayPal va a cobrarse una comisión de como 5, 6, 7, 10% para trasladarlo y ponerlo en pesos o en su moneda, y ellos están ganando mucho más. Entonces, ellos quieren confirmar de dónde vienes, de dónde estás, para confirmar que si está de otro país, puede cobrarles las comisiones en mandar el dinero atrás en su país. Entonces, un ITIN sirve para eso, pero no es como 100%, es complicado, es difícil, pero un ITIN sirve en ayudar en recibir aprobación cuando llega ese problema, siempre lo va a llegar eventualmente. Sí, Roberto está de acuerdo. PayPal es horrible si hacer afuera de Estados Unidos. Mucho mejor Apple Pay con Stripe. Sí, es mejor Stripe, pero Robert, si está vendiendo todo el mundo, hay gente como yo a veces, si estoy viendo algo que me gusta eso y quiero, y yo intento pagar, y si yo tengo que buscar mi tarjeta y tipearlo, yo voy a decir, no quiero, y salir. Cuando si PayPal está, yo voy a decir, clic, clic, compra y me manda. Y los gringos son así, entonces vale la pena tener la opción en Estados Unidos, pero es por eso pedimos ITIN para nuestro cliente, porque eventualmente va a querer PayPal y podemos avanzar. Quizás tenemos que mostrar más o menos que vive en Estados Unidos, pero um, eso es. Apple Pay sin buscar tarjetas. Si tiene un iPhone, la mayoría de los americanos sí tienen iPhones, pero yo no uso los dos. Yo tengo iPhone y Android, pero sí, yo soy un persona de opciones. Mejor tener todas las opciones. Google Pay, yo tengo historia de Google Pay, pero bueno, ya, todos mis amigos, ya estoy tarde, ya tengo que irme. Muchas gracias por estar aquí. Thanks for being here. Nos vemos en la próxima semana. Ya estoy hecho. 1 hora y media sin pararme. Yo puedo hablar. Bueno, hablamos. Muchas gracias. Te agradezco, les agradezco, y nos vemos a todos.